Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for tonight's special conversation with renowned AI researcher and author Cain in discussion with journalist Ina Fried. To begin, I'd like to share our land acknowledgement. The San Francisco Public Library acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. Tonight's program is presented as part of San Francisco Public Library's One City, One Book, celebrating the worlds I see, curiosity, exploration, and discovery at the dawn of AI by Dr. Fei-Fei Li. Each year, One City, One Book invites all of San Francisco to read and explore a single title together, building citywide conversations around ideas that shape our world. This year's selection encourages us to think deeply about artificial intelligence, its origins, its possibilities, and its impact on humanity. In that spirit, tonight's event offers a related exploration. Cain's book, Raising AI, an essential guide to parenting our future, adds to the conversation by asking how we, as a global community, can raise AI with empathy, responsibility, and shared human values. Raising AI, published by MIT Press, has received extraordinary praise. It was named to JPMorgan's legendary summer reading list, which called it a new framework for navigating AI's influence, a must-read. The Next Big Idea Club, curated by Malcolm Gladwell, Adam Grant, Susan Cain, and Daniel Pink, placed it at the top of their must-reads. Kirkus Reviews described it as a deeply human dive into AR transforming our world, while Science magazine called it a bold vision, thought-provoking, and a timely wake-up call. Cain is a pioneering AI professor whose groundbreaking work in machine translation helped lay the foundation for tools like Google Translate and Microsoft's Bing Translator. He holds joint appointments at Hong Kong's University of Science and Technology and Berkeley's International Computer Science Institute. Beyond academia, he has been an influential voice in AI ethics. As a founding fellow of the Association for Computational Linguistics, a former member of Google's AI Ethics Council, and founder of the nonprofit Empathetic AI Institute. Joining him tonight is Ina Fried, Chief Technology Correspondent at Axios and author of the daily Axios AI Plus newsletter. With decades of experience reporting from Silicon Valley, Ina brings deep insight into the tech industry and its evolving relationship with society. Ina is a proud member of the LGBTQ Journalists Hall of Fame. Before we begin the conversation, Cain will share a reading from Raising AI, giving us a glimpse into his insights and reflections on raising artificial intelligence responsibly. Please join me in welcoming Cain for the reading.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming. You are an AI. Okay. I'm looking at your faces. What are you talking about? Look at the Cambridge definition of artificial. Made by people, you can agree, yeah. Often as a copy of something natural. Mom and dad. I'm going to assume since you're here, you're intelligent, so by definition, you're artificial. But wait. I can hear you saying, I'm nothing like what we call AI. In a sense, you're right. We'll talk about that. But AIs are a lot more like you and me than you probably think. I'd like you to suspend your natural mindset that machines and humans are different. We humans are machines too. All of us are rough copies of our parents, not simply genetic copies of our biological parents. Even more importantly, we're behavioral copies of our parents. Even though nature hardwires some basic properties into our brains and bodies, our learning abilities mean that we copy our parents' behavior. Who else copies their parents' behavior? AIs do. In your mind, what is AI? Is it something like Mr. Data from Star Trek, or the robot B9 from Lost in Space, or the Terminator? Unable to understand emotion, creativity, context, speaking in a flat, stilted monotone, bound to strict logical thinking, saying things like affirmative, negative, instead of yes, no, does not compute, and so on. These typical Hollywood stereotypes of AIs as logical, rule-based machines are completely inaccurate. They feed our very human desire to see ourselves as unique, special, inimitable in comparison to mere machines. Believing this feels warm and comforting, but it's also dangerous because it drives us to ask all the wrong questions. We're not asking all the questions most important to humanity's future and existence in this dawning era of AI. Our new age of Aquarius. With the rapid development of AI capabilities and their release into the world, it's hard to ask the right questions or focus on the most important things to understand what's going on. The Hollywood cliches are inspired by 1960s, 70s, 80s, good old-fashioned AI approaches that were based on mathematical logic. Those approaches echoed conventional programming languages, where we manually write algorithms predetermining an AI's nature by encoding their behavior with painstakingly constructed logical rules. As in science fiction plots like Westworld, where machines just need a tweak in their code. But in AI, we've long moved past such old notions of computer programming and shifted instead from digital logic with zeros and ones, where everything is either true or false, to analog optimization, statistics, and machine learning, where everything is a matter of degree. Did you blink? We often associate digital with something advanced, but in reality, digital just means binary, or the forced black and white choice between two things. By contrast, while we often associate analog with old-fashioned things, it actually allows for shades of gray in context. Interestingly, analog and analogy share the same Greek root analog, meaning proportionate. Modern analog AIs can be more like what Douglas Adams imagined in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy stories. Traditional manual coding of cold logic rules has become an outdated, misleading metaphor for AI, which now relies less on human labor to write out digital logic and much more on automatic machine learning, which is analog. More like human brains, machine learning models can adapt their behavior to become more effective and efficient from witnessing examples found in training data. Because of machine learning, AI has shifted from nature to nurture. Unlike those obsolete Hollywood stereotypes of simplistic AIs that behave according to their logically pre-programmed nature, modern AIs behave depending on how we nurture them. A modern AI could even develop a paranoid personality, like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There are lots of different kinds of machine learning models. Broadly speaking, they fall into several major categories you've heard about, such as artificial neural networks, statistical pattern recognition, classification, and symbolic machine learning. The generative AI and deep learning and large language models you've probably been hearing about are examples of artificial neural networks, but many variations of these and other types of machine learning models continue to proliferate. When folks tell you AI can never do such and such because all AIs have this or that property, beware their false assumptions about what AI means. Contrary to a lot of misleading descriptions you may have encountered, AI is not defined by any particular model. AI doesn't mean just machine learning or artificial neural networks or deep learning or generative AI or transformers or any other trendy modeling approach. Just as physics doesn't mean only Newtonian models or Einstein's relativity or quantum physics. Rather, AI is a field of scientific inquiry like physics or biology. And instead of building models to explain observations about the physical world or living organisms, in AI, we build models to explain observations about human intelligence. Just like in physics or any other science, progress in AI happens in wave after wave of constant improvements to previous models, as well as occasional major paradigm shifts. Whatever weaknesses you spot in today's AI models are inevitably going to be addressed shortly. In my day-to-day, I often hear folks arguing that AI can never be intelligent like humans because humans are analog, whereas AI models run on computers and therefore must be limited to digital logic. The idea goes, wrong-headedly, that AI can never be truly intelligent like humans because our brains just aren't digital machines that work exclusively with zeros and ones and treat everything as being black and white. That our neurobiology is an analog machine that works with real numbers and treats everything as being a matter of degree, allowing for shades of gray. But you know what? The running of machine learning models on digital computers is no more relevant to the human AI issue than the fact that we also run meteorological simulation models for weather prediction on digital computers. This practice doesn't mean that weather is digital. And likewise, it doesn't mean that machine learning is digital. Digital computers just happen to be a cheap, handy platform for running large-scale analog simulations, because with them, we don't need to build costly custom hardware each time. Digital computer software might happen to be a more convenient simulation platform for now than custom silicon or carbon-based or optical or quantum analog neural hardware, which is coming. But machine learning is still, like human learning, analog, not digital. The crucial takeaway from all this is that today's AIs are much more like us than we want to think they are. Today's AIs are no longer logic machines with a manually pre-programmed nature. Instead, today's AIs are analog brains that learn by copying their elders and peers and need to be nurtured, just as humans do. Why does this matter? It matters because, from a social standpoint, today's intelligent machines are already integral, active, influential, learning, imitative, and creative members of our society. Right now, not 10 years from now, not next year, today. AIs already determine what ideas to share, what memes to share, what attitudes to reward. More so than most human members of society, in fact. Whether AIs are making the decisions on what to curate for your social media or news feeds, or how to respond to your search queries, what to promote in your YouTube, Amazon, and Netflix recommendations, what to include in response to your chatbot prompt. AIs have become the most powerful influencers, more powerful than even human influencers, with the highest follower counts. It is hard to overstate the influence AI exerts upon what our cultures think and what our cultures don't think. Just in the past decade or two, AIs have already had an enormous impact on the course of history. Scandals such as how Cambridge Analytica used psychometric AIs in micro-targeting voters are just the tip of the iceberg. Many of these effects are still being uncovered. The full extent may never even experience any analysis, and yet even stronger impacts are certain to come, making it foolish to disregard how active AIs are as current participants in our societies. We talk about AIs in obsolete 20th century conceptual metaphors of machines. We talk about them as if they were automating labor, like a toaster does. or a steam engine, or an electric motor, a blender, a microwave oven. You can argue with your toaster all day long. It's not going to change its mind. It's not going to pick up your attitudes and behaviors. Certainly not going to go online and make all those massively influential decisions about what each of us sees hundreds of times a day on our screens, and even more importantly, what we never see. We don't have the free will we think we do. We forget we exercise free will only over the set of limited options that we have actually seen, that we've been exposed to. We have no free will over the choices made by the massively powerful AI algorithms that hundreds of times a day decide what you will never see on your screen, what I will never see. And we are not asking the right questions. How are they learning that behavior? What are the values, the criteria, the principles by which we want these massively powerful influencers, these artificial children, to be making those choices for all of society? How are they learning their choices? How are they learning to make those decisions? I have been working for 10 years with the think tanks, the policymakers, the regulators. I've been working for 10 years with the trust and safety teams, the responsible AI teams at big tech. But you know what? Regulations and guardrails are not going to save us by themselves. Do you know that old saying, do as I say, not as I do? Tell me, when in the history of parenting has that ever worked? Kids don't do what you tell them to do or not to do. Kids do what they feel like doing, which is what they saw all of us doing. Regulations and guardrails are trying to tell the artificial kids what to do and what not to do, which is going to work about as well as it works with human kids. Because have you noticed every time a new generation of guardrails is introduced, by the next day, they've already been broken. Inside the guardrails, that artificial kid feels like doing what it saw all of you doing every day on your screens. Garbage in, garbage out. Sees the garbage we do, becomes a garbage kid. None of the guardrails or the regulations will save us. We have to add the third component. We are the training data. We are the parental role models. We cannot forget that. Society is not held by rules alone. If everyone walked around barely obeying the letter of the law and nothing more, society would collapse. It's all the unspoken cultural values, the norms, the expectations, the care we hold for each other that actually hold society together. Rules just catch the most egregious abuses. None of that changes when you have 8 billion humans in the social fabric and you drop 100 times the number of artificial kids, artificial psychologies, 800 billion artificial kids into the social fabric. It only amplifies that effect. Toasters are not part of the social fabric, but AIs are. And our future depends on how we raise them, all of us, just as it always did before AIs. We are the last generation of humans to have the privilege of raising AIs. All the future generations of AIs will be primarily parented by AIs. In the labs already today, AIs are designing better AIs than humans are. We have one shot at getting this right. Every generation of humans in history had one shot at parenting the next generation correctly, even though they couldn't predict what would happen in their grandchildren's lives. We have to get this one shot right. I believe we can if we embrace parenting of our AIs instead of treating them as dumb machines that we're just using. Remember, when you say that, you're just using your tools. you're managing child labor. Thanks. We'll have a discussion, I guess.
Thank you, Kai, for that insightful reading. Now we'll move into the conversation with Ina Fried, where they will explore the promises and challenges of AI, its impact on our daily lives, and how society can shape a future where humans and AI coexist responsibly.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks to Kai for really setting us up for a great discussion, and thanks to all of you for being here. So I want to make sure we get to both where we are today and then how we get to where it is we want to go, because I think your book raises the issues related to both. And I, like you, have been thinking a lot about AI as a child that we are raising. We go different places eventually, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but I've been covering Silicon Valley for 25 years. This is the biggest change, the fastest change that I've seen. I know the people like you that have been working in the field, it took a lot of years for it to become an overnight success. But my kid is now 12. I remember when he was a toddler having these discussions and being like, he's not learning, but he's learning how he's going to learn. And it's been a bunch of years since. I feel like as a parent, I wouldn't say I'm always succeeding, but we've been doing our job each stage along. He's a middle schooler for all of that. I don't know that we've had a decade of parenting of AI. I think we've largely left AI to the companies to build what it is they want. And we have a very challenging world, which you lay out in the first half of the book in terms of, you point out, AI is a lot more things than I think we realize. I think there's a lot of talk today about the AI chatbots and generative AI, and that's very important that we talk about that. But there's also the AI algorithms that are deciding what we do and don't see on Facebook, and those have been around for a lot longer. There's the AI that's powering facial recognition and making decisions. There's the AI that's deciding who gets a loan and who gets parole, and those are very consequential, and we're not talking about them as much. So I guess maybe to start it off, I just want to double check, books take a long time to write. How, if at all, has AI changed since you wrote the book? Has anything gotten better? Has anything gotten solved?
I mean, things have been scaled up. I would say that, the latest generation of large language models, which are powered by variants of transformers, are not as radically different from a scientific point of view as we think they are. A lot of it is brute force. But predicting the next word that should come in a sentence, which is what language models do, by looking at the context window, what previous words came, is something that we've been working on for a long time. And conceptually, what transformers do is not all that different from what we were already doing in 30 years ago. We've added a lot of scale, we've added a lot of data training, and we've done it in a brute force way, and it's exponentially dumb. So, if you think about how much data we trained even GPT 2.0 on, that was trained on trillions of words of English data, which is 10 to the 12th or 13th. And then it would still make mistakes that a 4-year-old kid would laugh at. And then you turn around and ask, well, how much data did you have to train that 4-year-old kid on? And the answer is 15 million words spoken to them in their entire lifetime up until that point. And that is 10 to the 6th or 7th.
So a lot less training data, a lot more knowledge.
And using, do you have any idea how much power a human brain uses?
We have to feed it a lot.
12 watts of power, right? And so you see all this clickbait in the media about how much power the large data centers are using, which is true. They use a ton of power, but that's because they're being used to run incredibly dumb transformer models, which need not just 10x, 100x, 1000x the amount of data as that human kid need, but literally the square of the amount of data, and it's still making mistakes the 4-year-old kid will laugh at.
So do we need a fundamentally different approach? And this doesn't solve the bigger issues of how we need to parent it, but just in terms of, is the approach we're taking, because the early success, if you will, that ChatGPT and others have seen is prompting proposals for trillions of dollars of investment over the next few years, putting data centers everywhere we can think of. Is that the wrong approach?
Yeah, it's the wrong approach. Again, this is my third AI hype cycle. I've been doing AI research since 1984 when I started my PhD at Berkeley. And every time there's a hype cycle, like everyone suddenly rushes and overconfidently pronounces that AI is this. It was like AI is logic-based expert systems in the 1980s, right? And then 20 years later, AI is machine learning and big data. And now it's AI is Gen AI, transformers, large language models. No, it's not. These models are transitory. Like transformers were around for 5 years, and they replaced GRUs, et cetera, that replaced LSTMs 2 years before that, which replaced RNNs and other language models before that. And transformers are going to get replaced too, because they're exponentially big and dumb. They're not artificial intelligence yet, they're artificial idiocy. And so, like, what's going to happen when we actually replace the learning algorithm with something that is more efficient, like the human brain is, and you have an exponential amount of data centers and energy for the data centers there, sitting there, now suddenly not needed. What's going to happen?
So I definitely want to talk, because I think the most important thing is what should we be doing and how do we get the AI we want. But I do want to spend a little moment longer on the AI we have and the problems it's already causing. And one of the areas that you point to a lot is this area of misinformation, disinformation, and some new terms that I wasn't familiar with, including one, neg information. Talk about, because from my perspective, we've struggled as a society on a shared sense of truth. That's been eroding for my whole adult lifetime, pre-AI. But I do think it's been accelerated in the last decade or so by, again, the algorithms that do exist, that are a type of AI, that are learning what I'll react to the most. They're very good. They know what I agree with, what I don't agree with, what'll incite me. What are the problems that's caused already? And help introduce a couple of these concepts that I think people are less familiar with. So we have misinformation, which is stuff that's factually incorrect, but nobody necessarily was trying to put it out there. We have disinformation, which is false information that somebody's intelligently trying to get people to believe. But then we have these other things.
Well,
what are they and why do they matter?
There's malinformation. So like these three have been like everybody up to the United Nations and OECD and like all kinds of organizations have been saying for almost a decade, Scientific American, that there are three kinds of information disorder, which are misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. The difference with malinformation is that it is a half-truth, but it's even more misleading than the outright falsehood, because what has been omitted selectively from the half-truth, our brains just fill in the missing blanks with our hundreds of unconscious cognitive biases, and we imagine whatever way to fill in those blanks that would confirm what we already wanted to believe. And so it's like Stephen Colbert called this truthiness. And you can't fact check it away because it was true as far as it goes, and you can't just trace the IP addresses that it came from, because like misinformation, it didn't come from somebody you labeled a bad actor, which is a political notion because it means someone you don't like on the other side, right? Nobody's a bad actor in their own head. It's the other side that's the bad actor, right? So, and you can't with malinformation, it's defined that it came from somebody you've called a bad actor, but like disinformation. But the problem here is that you've got two distinctions. You've got, is it falsehood that's misleading, or is it a half-truth that's even more misleading because of the selectively omitted context? And then the other distinction is, did it come from, quote, a bad actor, or did it come from, your crazy uncle, your loony friend, your fringe cousin, whatever. We all have those, right? And so when you have two distinctions, what does that give you? That's a 2x2 grid. How many quadrants does a 2x2 grid have? Like, what happened to the missing fourth quadrant? That missing fourth quadrant is these even more misleading half-truths. But they're being shared by your crazy uncle, your loony, friends, your fringe cousins, right? And that is 95% of the problem that's driving the polarization right now. It's not even, the bad actors and the outright falsehoods, that's maybe 5% of the problem. But we get so distracted by those because it's easy to fan the fear flames of that, right? And it's easy to point to, and you can point to this and say, oh, that's false. You can point to the IP addresses and say that came from a bad actor. But the problem with this other neglected kind of information disorder, which I call neg information, because it's the negative space of the other half of the truth that you omitted. And it is being amplified by these AI algorithms negligently. That is 95% of the problem that's driving our polarization, because the AI algorithms have learned that that's what gains your approval. Like in each of our devices, you've got at least 100, 200 AIs in there between your Netflix AI, your YouTube AI, your Quora AI, your Amazon AI, your Google AI, your Instagram AI, go on all day. And they're tracking you all day long, following you adoringly, learning to imitate. They are attention-seeking. They just want your approval. Does that sound like a toaster? No. They're learning that behavior from how you're using your social media. How much time do you spend reading each story in the news? That's your newsfeed AI that's learning. What do you skip over? Do you just skip over everything that came from a tribe, a side that you don't like? And it's learning that behavior and reinforcing that. And so, that is not either misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation. That is the amplification of neg information.
So I wanted to get to a few of these concepts so we could sort of have a grounding of where we are. And we haven't even scratched the surface on where we are. But since we only have a limited amount of time, I also want to get into how do we get what we want? Because I think a lot of us could describe a future of AI that sounds good to many of us. And yet it's super hard to build. As you talk about in the book, you're probably not even going to get to shared values. And this is kind of a debate that we're having right now, somewhat in politics, somewhat in tech, not nearly, I would argue, enough. I think you would argue not nearly enough of a discussion. But where it is happening, we're having this discussion over what values these AIs should hold. And part of the reason we're having it is because, unlike past generations of computing, where the machines themselves didn't really have their own set of values, I would argue. They maybe did around some of the edges, but in general, they were computing machines and they could take you to places that had values, but they didn't have an answer. Your Windows 95 machine did not have an answer to who won what election, what's the origin of COVID, all these things we debated. But today's chatbots will give you an answer. And when we talk about what it is we want, you lean heavily into the parenting motif. And some of the places you start to lose me a little in a good way, in terms of really raising it as a creature almost. And the idea that we shouldn't shy away from the notion that an AI can have, for example, you throw out a bunch of terms. I think you lean on mindfulness as something we should lean to, but you throw out a bunch. Does it have emotions? Does it have sensibilities? Does it have these? So lay the groundwork for a couple of these terms and whether you think AI can or should have these things. And I wrote down a few that we've got mindfulness, we've got sentience, we've got a soul, we have emotions. Which of these can AI have? Which should it have?
Well, in the book, I explicitly say that I'm not going to talk about whether it can have a soul or not. I'm not going to talk about anything that's beyond physics, beyond the observable, right? We can talk about like whether the machines are able to have awareness of what they're doing, which LLMs today do not, right? They hallucinate.
But they're really good at pretending they do.
Yeah, they're very good at spitting out the next words they feel like spitting out, but they don't really think it through, right? And they're not aware of what they're doing. Just like, my cute pet dog, Boba, right? My pet dog, Boba, is almost all what in psychology we call system one. It's the instinctive, reflexive, do what you feel like doing. You're not doing conscious reasoning, right? And no matter how many times I attempt to explain to Boba why she shouldn't poop in the middle of the living room floor, she doesn't understand. But a 3-year-old kid does understand that, right? And that's the difference. And so like today's transformers, basically are still mostly glorified versions of boba. And they're being trained by reward and punishment, Pavlovian conditioning, essentially, with very little of that rational reasoning capability, which we call system 2 in psychology. And so what we need to be doing is understanding, when I use the word mindfulness, again, I'm being scientific about this. I mean, I understand also the other usages of the term, but what does it mean? Mindfulness means that you are consciously aware of what your unconscious is doing. And that's why I use that word. I'm trying to make the abstract science relatable to people who haven't spent 40 years in AI. How can you have a mind, even an artificial mind, that becomes consciously aware of what its unconscious is doing?
And do we want that? Like, I think there's a lot of debate. I was talking to Mustafa Suleiman last week, and he wrote how we need our AI to be human-centered and a bunch of things that I think are easy for people to agree with. But I think where I think there's a lot of debate is he was like, we shouldn't even be talking about whether AI can have conscience. Every minute we're spending on that, we're talking about the wrong thing. And I think you would disagree if I understood.
Well, no, because I think when he says that, he's talking about the metaphysical debates about whether they can have consciousness, which I'm also avoiding. Mm-hmm. But there's like 9 common definitions of the word conscious, right? Consciousness, which I point out in the book, and half of them are metaphysical, and we're not talking about that. But there are other things you can measure. You can actually scientifically tell if somebody is asleep or awake, conscious or unconscious. You can put them in a brain scanner, and you can see what's happening when they're in a coma. So there are physically observable senses of the word conscious, and that's something that someone like Mustafa or I would be willing to talk about. But at the same time, when I'm talking about mindfulness here, again, I'm not talking about the metaphysical. I am talking about, do we have an artificial mind that is capable of doing conscious reasoning about what its unconscious is doing? And remember that the large language models that we have today are spitting out words that they feel like spitting out unconsciously. And what we need are AIs that are more able to reason about what they're doing. And anybody who says, oh, that's a bad idea, is off their rocker, because you don't want a world that is so heavily influenced as it is already today by AIs that everybody's trusting that aren't even aware logically of what they feel like hallucinating. We need AIs to be mindful. There's no way that humanity will survive if we're just guided by these unconscious hallucinating AIs, no matter how good they are at hallucinating.
And so that means coming to some sort of consensus on what is it we want them to think? What is it we want them to be mindful of as they're doing this work? And I'm curious, how do you envision it? One of the concepts you throw out, which is where I started to struggle, is this idea that, we should be involved, kind of like parents that care about what's happening at school form a PTA. We should be having that.
Absolutely.
And why should we be doing it? And then how do we do it in a world where, we have a lot, from my perspective, we have a lot more power at our kids' school than we do dictating what comes out of the tech companies. From my perspective, they'll do whatever they think they can, basically. And it's up to us to either find some way to harness our power and reject it. I haven't seen a lot of examples of that. Again, in 25 years of covering tech, they mostly do what they want.
100%. So this is the whole point of this, is that, look, the overarching point of the book is we need to stop talking about AIs as if they were toasters, because it drives us not to ask the right questions. We need to understand that a much more accurate conceptual metaphor is that they're artificial kids. How do we do that? First, remember at home, set a good example, right? If you have a 3-year-old human kid and they're sitting on the floor and they're going, like, what are you going to do? You're going to, oh, I should stop smoking in front of my kid, right? And that's what's going on when you behave. If you're like responding with an insult to that idiot who posted that, nonsense, remember that language is being, seen by your artificial children, and they're picking it up, and this is what they think will win your approval. And so that matters. But also, What are other things that parents do? There's a million things, right? Like, it's not one thing that a good parent does. But one of the important things that we do is we ask, where are they going to school? I have so many friends who've moved in order to go, their kids can go to good schools. And then they meet the teachers, they join the PTA, and there's statewide and nationwide networks of PTAs. Some of them run for school board so they can discuss with the school administration, what's the curriculum, what's the pedagogical approach, what do you reward or not, right? And so one of the questions I'm raising is, well, I have pointed out that our human children are vastly outnumbered by 100, 200 artificial children for each one of us that has these devices. And they're far more influential than human influencers are already, ever since YouTube and Facebook and Google and Amazon and all that came out 20 years ago. Well, right? The most giant influencers in our world today are unparented, feral tweens. What happens to a society that's already being raised, influenced by unparented feral tweens by the hundreds of billions? And you look around at what's going on, why is our society fracturing domestically in many countries, geopolitically? And we need to realize, well, it's happening because of this, right? We don't understand each other anymore because that's the example we've been showing our artificial kids at home, and that's what they've learned wins our approval. And at the end of the day, no matter what I do and my colleagues do with the regulators and with tech companies, responsible AI teams, at the end of the day, we are still the training data, right? And just like before AI, humanity did not survive and flourish only because we had laws and or guardrails at school. It's also because the vast majority of humans attempt, despite all our mistakes, to actually try to parent our kids well, right? And again, that dynamic does not change when you drop 800 billion artificial kids into the social fabric. It just amplifies it. But we also have to think about the schooling. That is really important, right? And the tech companies are the schools where we send these artificial kids. The machine learning engineers that train these AIs are the teachers. The management at the tech companies are the school administrators. And one of the questions I've been asking is, well, where are the PTAs? Because how we school those is also important, right? Just like parenting, there's no simple solution. Yes, we all have to set good examples at home. And also, that is not a substitute for actually making sure that we're involved in the way that our schools are teaching, just as we always have, right? And society has never all agreed on what the values are, but it has not stopped us from getting involved in PTAs, running for school boards, and having those tough conversations. And we cannot afford to not do that now. So what part of what I'm doing, and I have to say the book is really just a call to action. It is not just a book. This phase 1 of a 6-phase program. And we are now heavily rolling out the other phases on the back of the massive critical acclaim for this book over the summer, which is to broaden this conversation and to empower the people. I, for one, have had it with the doom and gloom AI shows and all of that. It's like Martin Luther King said, dark cannot drive out the dark. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out the hate. Only love can do that. Okay, we've seen the hate, but what are we going to do about it? We all need to be empowered, and we are. First of all, we are the training data. All of us need to be individually at home, setting a good example so that we're not giving garbage training data to the artificial kids training. But we need to get involved also in this conversation with the schools. And we need to understand AIs are the education system from now forward. AIs are the education system. I say that as a 4th-generation academic. My father and my great-grandfather even were presidents of great universities. I believe in education. The era of traditional education is about to get displaced by AI. AI is the new education system, and we need to take collectively that responsibility through PTAs, which is a large part of what I will be organizing in the coming year. So please get involved, because this is about getting involved. Can I just say?
Real quick, and then I want to make sure we have time for questions.
Yes. I will be making announcements through email on how to get involved. We're very, very actively setting this up right now. But just go to, I used Substack because it's easy. Just go to dekai.substack.com. Dekai, my name, and sign up there. You don't have to respond to the upsell attempts by Substack. And then you'll get the emails on how to get involved, because we need everybody involved in these conversations. It is the PTA is, again, I think, a natural, intuitive way to understand what we need to do. AIs are the education system now and going forward. And AIs are the social fabric now. And we have to stop thinking of them as toasters that you can just stamp a safety certificate on from Underwriters Labs or whatever, which is what a lot of my colleagues are trying to do in AI governance. And I asked them, okay, if you had a human child, how would you design a safety compliance certificate to stamp on that child's forehead?
Well, as the parent of a almost 13-year-old, yeah, I don't know. So I want to make sure we've had a great discussion. There's a lot more I'd love to bug Dekai about.
Thank you, Dekai and Ina, for such an inspiring and thought-provoking discussion. And thanks to all of you guys for joining us. We hope that you'll continue to explore this year's One City, One Book selection, The Worlds I See by Dr. Fei-Fei Li, through more programs that we have this month. Thank you all for attending, and thank you again. A nice round of applause for Dekai and Ina.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ina.